Chapter 7, verse 1. We'll start there. Okay. I think you guys have had time to get over there. We're going to start the second half of the book of Ecclesiastes today, and it's a little bit more positive. Actually, today will feel kind of like a depressing lesson, I think, but it's only because I want you to realize where true happiness is today. And so we'll talk. It's actually a little bit, I was reading over my notes, and I'm like, this is kind of a bummer lesson, but I don't know. Wait till you get to the end. I think we will learn some good stuff in here. You know, I made this lesson. It's been like over a month, I think, since we've even had a get-together. It's been like a month. But I studied these weeks ago to get the lesson ready, and we are just now able to do it. And one thing I noticed is that with Ecclesiastes, when I first read it, or when I first start studying the verses, I don't really understand them so well. Like, they don't make a lot of sense to me right then. Ecclesiastes 7. They don't always make a lot of sense when I first study them. And then when I sit on them a few weeks and I think about them for a few weeks, they make more sense. So when I was going over this stuff today, I'm like, wow, this makes a lot more sense to me now. So if you guys need me to slow down and explain something a little bit better, I know it can be a little bit hard to understand these sometimes. This is a tough book, I think. This is a tough book to study. And if we want to keep doing metamorphosis later, I'll pick some easier stuff. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get into it. These are really great chapters here. So the first half of the book of Ecclesiastes, he was living his life of luxury. He was the king. Solomon was on top of things. He was at the top of the food chain. He had everything he ever wanted. And did it bring him happiness? No. He said, it's all meaningless. This doesn't bring me any joy. All this stuff's going to go away. I'm going to die. All this stuff isn't going to mean anything forever. I'm just repeating some of the stuff a little bit. So that was the first half of the book. The second half, Ecclesiastes, Solomon decides to look at life from a simple person's perspective, which would be like you and me, people who aren't kings, people who aren't rich. Let's look at life from our perspective. And he's going to see if that helps him to find more meaning in life. And there actually are a lot of ways he finds a lot more meaning doing it that way. And so we're going to look at the world through the lens of the common man, and we're going to see if that makes life look a little bit better. Ecclesiastes 7:1. We'll do the first few verses a little bit slow. So we'll just read the first verse where it says, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. They say the day of your death is better than the day of one's birth. Now, yeah, we would not think of that as being a good day. Why would the day of our death be a good day? But you know what? For the Christian, this is actually absolutely true, because when you think about it, the day that we die, that's the day we get to go up to heaven, where we'll be in a perfect place. We'll be with God for forever. We'll never be sad again. That's going to be actually a really good day. Paul wrote that for the Christian, death is a victory. He said death has no sting for a Christian. So whenever we die, that will be better for us than anything that took place before we died. Pastor John was doing a sermon, it's like January or February, and he said, whenever a Christian dies, we always get really sad and we feel really, we miss them. But he was saying it really doesn't make sense because they're in such a better place than they would be on this earth. I just remember him talking about that and how we should be happy for a Christian whenever a Christian dies, because they're going on to a better place. They're going to be in heaven for eternity. We should be excited for them. And then I remember when he preached that same week that he preached that, Jack Watts, who was one of the men of our church, he passed away that week. I remember thinking that week, like, he had preached that in the sermon, and it was really true for us that week that we were thinking, Jack Watts is in a better place. And we were sad because we missed him. And most of you knew Jack Watts. Well, maybe not most of you, but yeah. You girls remember him. So we knew that he was in a better place. And I even felt, this might be kind of weird, but I was kind of even jealous of him a little bit. Like, I thought, how great it is to just be in heaven. Well, you're not supposed to be jealous, so that's why I say it was kind of weird, but I just wished I could be in heaven too. I was happy for Jack Watts, and he lived a good long life. But anyway, this section of Ecclesiastes right here, it's emphasizing that it's saying here death is better than life. And why is it saying that? Solomon's trying to find the meaning to life. This is going to give us a really great lesson right here. We'll read these verses. He says, if you want to find the meaning of life, you need to start with death. So look at verse 2. He says, better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Surely oppression destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. Now, again, I know that's some deep stuff right there. I want to help you understand it a little bit. And we could summarize it. Here's what I want you to write down from that. If you want your life to mean something, figure out where you want to be in life when you die. We have to write that down. And work backwards. Yeah. I'm not clicking off. You can keep writing. If you want your life to mean something, figure out where you want to be in life when you die and work backwards. Now, I'm saying that to teenagers, and you guys are probably not thinking about where do I want to be when I die. And I realize that. That's what these verses are saying. Now, for us, that's a long ways off to think about. Where do I want to be? I don't know where I'm going to be when I die. I don't know what kind of place I want to be at in life. I don't know what kind of things I want to have achieved first. We don't think about those things a whole lot. This is kind of a call here to actually start thinking about those things. Think about where you want to be in 5 years. Maybe make it a little bit shorter. Think, this is the same logic that you'd apply. Where do I want to be in 5 years? Think about that, and then work backwards from that. So if I want to be a graduating senior in 5 years, then, I think about, what do I need to do? What do I need to have done 4 years from now? What do I have to have done 3 years from now? What do I need to be doing today? That gives you a direction for your life for today, because you think about, where do I want to be in 4 years, 5 years, whatever you want to set it at. Maybe setting a goal. Figure out, what is something I really want to be able, what is something I want to achieve? What is a goal that I have? Give yourself a goal and then work backwards from there. And think, what kind of things can I be doing to help me achieve that goal? So one of my goals is I want to know what every book of the Bible is about. I'm not going to memorize them all, obviously, but I want to memorize at least a description of what they're all about, so that someone can say, what is the book of Zephaniah about? And I would just know. So that's something I'm working on. And I check my progress on that and stuff like that.
What's the book of Amos about?
That's the one that we're studying now. And I wanted to study Amos partially because I wanted to know what Amos was about. Exodus, yeah. That's another one I've been studying too at home. Not to teach on, just to study. And that's part of why I was doing it. So I want to know about every book of the Bible and be able to say something about it. And so I looked, I thought, let's see, if I really study in depth 4 books of the Bible every year, then I'll know the whole, it'll take me 12 years or 15 years or something like that. I don't remember what it was. So I sped it up a little bit, and I tried to study multiple books of the Bible every year to achieve that goal. Anyway, have a goal for yourself. Now, this is the most true thing that we've read in Ecclesiastes so far. It said in verse 2, I think, better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. Why does it say that? The house of mourning, that'd be like a funeral home. It says better to go to that than to go to the house, just a second, dude, than to go to the house of feasting. Think about it this way. Here's what it's trying to tell us. Where are you going to learn more? If you where are you going to think about life more? If you go to a funeral home and sit in there for an hour, or if you go to Burger King and sit in there for an hour, where are you?
Probably the funerals. You're probably going to think where you're going.
What Dylan just said. You're going to think about life more at the funeral home. You're going to think about where your life is going. That's why it says it's better to be in the house of mourning than the house of feasting, because that one's actually going to it's going to make you reflect on life and think about where you're going. Let's look at verse 8. It says, the end of a thing is better than its beginning. I wish I could say that about the show Lost. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Do not hasten in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of fools. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. A lot of people will ask that question. It says here, why were the former days better than these? That's a way of saying, man, I miss the old times. I wish it was like back in the day. And then people are always talking about what it was like 10 years ago, what it was like 20 years ago, what it was like 2 years ago. People are always like, man, I miss that. I wish we could go back to that. The Bible says that's not a wise question to ask. It's called getting nostalgic. Do you ever have that feeling of nostalgic where you just kind of think, you start having memories of old things?
Yep.
And it kind of makes you a little bit sad because you're like, I miss those times. We all get that feeling.
I don't miss those times.
The Bible says not to ask that question. because one of the problems with that is whenever we're getting nostalgic and we just dwell on those things and think about the old days, we often tend to focus on the good things that we remember, and we forget about the bad things. Like we just think about the good memories, and we don't think about the bad things. Every season of life has good things and bad things going on. And sometimes in our memories, I wish I could go back to when I was 8 or something like that. But you forget the bad things that were going on whenever you were 8. You kind of just remember the good things a lot of the time. It's like the show Saturday Night Live. Everybody I've ever known has always said, man, Saturday Night Live used to be funny. Nowadays you turn it on and it's just stupid. I've heard like so many people say that. Saturday Night Live used to be funny. Let me tell you guys something. It was never funny. People just remember the funny skits. They have some really good skits every once in a while that people remember. And they remember the good ones, and they forget about the bad ones. So they just think, oh, it used to be funny, because all they remember is the good skits. Okay, Lucas, go ahead.
Hey.
Okay, I've offended some people by calling it not funny. I apologize. Let's go on. In the final episode of The Office, which was that TV show where people worked in an office, and they would do like little... Yeah, that blows your mind, I know.
Don't say.
That's a good show.
Yeah, it was one of my favorite shows when I was younger, like a teenager. They would do these things where like they do little interview clips, like it's a documentary style show, like Parks and Recreation, if you've ever seen that. Okay, so in The Office, on the last episode, they're looking back on the old times, and it's like they've been filming this documentary on the show, and they finally watch it in the last episode. They watch this documentary of their lives up to that point, and they get all nostalgic, and they talk about the good old days. And when you're watching it, you remember those old episodes, and you remember the good old days with them. And they say this line in it. And this line is really sad, but I think about this a lot. Someone says...
Wait, do we have to write this?
You don't have to write this one down. Good question. Someone says in that, I wish there was a way you could know you were in the good old days before you actually left them. They are saying, I wish when I was in the good old days, I would have appreciated those times more. That's what it's saying right there. And that is a thing that we do. A lot of times when you look back on the good memories and you're like, man, I wish I could be in those times. We are in times, someday we'll look back and you'll think, man, I remember when I was in the youth group. I remember when I was in high school. I remember when I was in middle school. And you'll think, man, those were some good times. Well, there are some good things about your life right now. Even though you might have some hard things, some things you're like, man, I wish I could get out of high school. I wish I could graduate and go on to college, or whatever you're saying. You will look back. You'll look back at this time and you'll say, there were some good things going on. So appreciate those things right now. In high school, you're like, oh, I just can't wait to go to college. When you're in college, you're like, man, I can't wait to just get graduated and have a job. And when sometimes you get a job and you're like, man, I can't wait till I get that next job and I get that next paycheck and I get a higher paycheck. Appreciate the times that you're in right now. Appreciate where God's put you right now. Don't just always be thinking about the next thing, but soak up all the goodness of where you are right now. So that quote in the TV show, I think about that all the time, about knowing that you're in the good times when you're in them right now. And I even remember driving the youth group van. This was like 2 or 3 years back. And I was driving it and I was thinking, oh man, I got to appreciate these times now because, I bet, this was like 2 or 3 years ago. I thought, man, I bet this is the best youth group we'll ever have. And I was like, oh, I just got to enjoy them and appreciate them right now. Because I bet someday I won't have kids as great as these. Yeah. But then, you know what? Like, I was always thinking that, and I was always appreciating who I had in the youth group at that time. And a couple years later, or like today, I'm enjoying the youth group as much or more than I ever have. Like, I think I just enjoy it more and more all the time. It's not like I don't look back and I think, man, I just wish so-and-so was still in the youth group. I really miss so-and-so. I never have thoughts like that. Even though I'm like, when someone would leave, I would be sad. I'd be like, man, I wish they were still around. But I always appreciate just more and more the people who are in the youth group. And when we have new people or when people have stuck around for years, I don't know. I never get sad and think, I wish it was like the old days. Now, I do get mad when like Ashley has to go turn 17, just whenever, or when someone has to go get older, and I just...
She's not even 15 yet.
Oh, okay. I thought, apologies.
I turned 18 in 10 months and 18 days.
Oh my goodness. She's on the countdown.
I turned 40.
I know, and it makes me sad. I do get angry about it because I'm like, oh, I wish you guys weren't growing up. Like, I don't like it when you guys get older.
You don't like me when I get older?
I have to grow up, but it's not as noticeable when I do it anymore. What?
I don't grow, just get older.
You don't grow, you just get older.
I think it's the same with me.
Okay, Lucas, one question real quick.
I'm old and odd.
Yes, Lucas is the
Oh, yeah,
oldest
he's
one in this room.
39.
He is like 30-something.
No, he's 30.
It's a long story. Here's what I'm going to say. We can get that wisdom from The Office, but let's also just get it from the Bible. The Bible just told us. It told it first. Enjoy where you are in life right now. Well, let's look at verse 11. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom is a defense as money is a defense, but the excellence of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to those who have it. It's saying there, a wise person's sheltered. Money can also be a shelter, but money will not add life to your years. Now, it might add years to your life. Have you ever heard that expression? It's not the years in your life that matter, it's the life in your years. Money can add years to your life because you can maybe buy healthier food or get better health care or just buy stuff to take good care of you, have a healthier lifestyle. It could do that. But money, Solomon is saying, it's not going to add life to your years. It's not going to make you a better person or a happier person. It can just get you better stuff. Okay, now the next part here, it's going to sound, he's going to tie all this together in the end. It's going to sound a little bit weird. It's going to be a little bit depressing. But it's showing here in these next verses. I'll just read it here. He says, consider the work of God, for who can make straight what he has made crooked? In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. Surely God has appointed the one as well as the other, so that a man can find out nothing will come after him. I've seen everything in the days of my vanity. There is a just man who perishes in his righteousness. There's a wicked man who prolongs life in his wickedness. Do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Do not be overly wicked, nor be foolish. Why should you die before your time?
How's that depression?
He's saying here, no matter what you do, you just die in the end. That's what he's saying. It's kind of depressing to think about, but he has a point to it. He said, it is good that you grasp this and also not remove your hand from the other, for he who fears God will escape them all. Okay, what Solomon's talking about there is two extremes that we fall in. Some people just think, oh, I'm going to die anyway. I'll just do all the evil stuff I can. I'll just do whatever I want. I'll just do whatever bad things I want. He says, don't be evil just because we all die in the end anyway. But here's another thing. He says, don't be overly righteous. Now, that's a weird thing. What does he mean, don't be over-righteous? Over-righteous is actually a word. What it means here is don't be legalistic. It says
What is that?
legalistic means that you're constantly worried about every little rule and being perfect all the time. Don't try to just be perfect all the time. And here's why. Verses 19. Wisdom strengthens the wise more than 10 rulers of the city. For there is not a just man on the earth who does good and does not sin. Also, do not take to heart everything people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. For many times you also, your own heart has known that you have even cursed others. So it's saying there, you can think you're a real perfect, good person. You can try to be as perfect as you want. And you can get mad when someone curses you, says something negative about you behind your back. You can get mad about that. But just remember, Solomon says, you've said bad things about people behind their back before. So you're not perfect either. You can get mad at someone for that, but you've done the same thing. So what's Solomon's point in pointing all this out to us? Nobody is perfect. So if you try to make your whole meaning in life about being a perfect person, you're not going to find your meaning there because you're not going to be perfect. You're just going to depress yourself. You're just going to get frustrated. If your whole meaning in life is just how good of a person you are, you're just going to notice all the bad things about yourself, and you're just going to be a really unhappy person. So Solomon says, don't look for your meaning in that. Don't look for your meaning in being a perfect person. Let's finish up the chapter here. Solomon says, all this I have proved by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. As for that which is far off and exceedingly deep, who can find it out? I applied my heart to know, to search and seek out wisdom in the reason of things, to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be trapped by her. Here's what I found, says the preacher, adding one thing to the other to find out the reason, which my soul still seeks, but I cannot find. One man among 1,000 I have found, but a woman among all these I have not found. Truly this only I have found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. And we'll finish up this chapter here. Here's what it's saying. God made man perfect. God made man a perfect being, but we seek out ways to do evil. Solomon was saying, I searched for wisdom. I searched high and low. I asked lots of people. I looked for people who could meet my standard of wisdom. But eventually what he found out is, if you just look for your meaning in other people who are really good or other people who are really wise, you're not going to find your meaning in them because they'll let you down. And I can think of smart, wise people that I've known, or really good people I've known. They've probably let me down at some point. They've probably done something that I thought was just not that great. They let me down a little bit. And if you put your meaning in other people, they will let you down. In 1999, they did a study, and it was shown in this study that children who listened to Mozart for 10 minutes before an IQ test, they did better on the test than children who didn't listen to Mozart. So they had two groups of children, ones who listened to Mozart, ones who didn't. The ones who listened to Mozart did better on their testing. And they proved this so that everyone suddenly believed Mozart would make you smarter if you listened to him. So, and Mozart, he's like a pianist, right?
Yes.
And how long ago did he live? Hundreds of years ago? More than 5. I'm not sure. I just didn't know if anyone knew off the top of their head. Okay, so I don't know. So teachers began assigning Mozart to their students. They said, listen to Mozart so you do better on tests. Parents began playing it for their kids. There's a guy who wrote a self-help book, made lots of money about how to listen to Mozart music. Mozart CDs were sold with labels, and these labels on them said, it'll make you smarter. It'll make your brain function at a higher level if you listen to this. Pregnancy supply catalogs, they began selling headphones for women's bellies that they could put on their bellies so their babies could listen to Mozart and be smarter when they came out.
What the heck?
That's really what they started selling. Here's the craziest one to me. It's not that one. The governor of Georgia decreed that every newborn must leave the hospital with a cassette of Mozart music.
Oh my gosh.
If only it
Them
was the
people
live
get
thing.
slapped in the head.
That's a sad thing.
This is why did everyone care so much about Mozart for that brief time in 1999? Well, mankind has just always had a fascination or an obsession with acquiring knowledge. We've always had an obsession with trying to get as much knowledge as possible. And Solomon is saying here, gaining all the knowledge and wisdom that you can, it's not going to solve all your problems. But, you know what? It actually will make a positive contribution to our lives. Wisdom doesn't solve every problem, but it does help us to see clearly and to face life stronger. You can write this one down. This is something great to know about
What's
wisdom.
up with the title that? I didn't like a title for it.
Better. That's what this whole lesson's about.
Like that one said finding meaning. But...
Wisdom makes life better is kind of just the main idea there. So chapter 7 was all about the benefits of wisdom. Wisdom will just help you have a better life. It's not going to fix every problem, but it's going to make life better. Not perfect, but it will make your life better. That's the guarantee that the Bible gives us. So listen, we don't always understand why the wicked person prospers and the righteous person doesn't. They lose out sometimes. But wisdom gives us the perspective to say that we're not going to get discouraged whenever that happens. Wisdom just teaches us that's what happens in life sometimes. That sometimes the wicked prosper and the righteous lose out. And you just don't let that ruin your life or ruin your faith or anything like that. So that's one lesson to get from this chapter. There's one more thing I want to pull from this chapter, and then we'll do chapter 8. Are you guys ready for the next note? You don't have time to be in a hurry.
Life sucks. Really? We gotta write that?
You don't have to write that part. You don't have to write the number 10. Just right here. You don't have time to be in a hurry. Okay, so why do I put you don't have time to be in a hurry? Something else that this chapter mentioned just kind of briefly, take your time. Do things right the first time. It said in there, the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. You know, we bring a lot of problems on ourselves because we're impatient and we don't just want to slow down and do things right the first time. And I'm just telling you, your life will be so much better
Yeah, like raking people's lawns.
if you learn patience. We did do that yesterday.
Yesterday.
And you know what? I think church kids are really, really good at patience because kids who have grown up in church and gotten used to sitting through sermons, they learn a lot of patience. And that will really help you in life. I mean, that is a real huge benefit to you. I know some sermons are not as interesting as others. I know some of them are boring compared to others. But when you just learn to sit through them, you actually do learn. That is a life skill. That's discipline, that you can sit through something that's not interesting. And I applaud you guys for being really faithful at being in church, being at things like this, because it actually does benefit you. Even sometimes when you think it might be boring or that you're not learning very much from it.
Like this is boring.
Yeah, exactly.
You gotta
But
have
it benefits you a lot
to go to school
to
and sit in a classroom.
to learn discipline and patience sitting through it. School will actually help you with that too. So if you have a problem with being patient, I can try to make it more boring so that you can learn patience better if you want me to. I'm just kidding, Nick.
Are you?
Okay, let's go on to chapter 8. Chapter 8's shorter, but let's go on to that one, and then we'll be done with today. Let's read the first 10 verses. It's like half the chapter. Who is like the wise man, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the sternness of his face is changed. I say, keep the king's commandment for the sake of your oath to God. Do not be hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand for an evil thing, for he does whatever pleases him. Where the word of a king is, there is power. And who may say to him, what are you doing? He who keeps his command will experience nothing harmful. And a wise man's heart discerns both time and judgment, because for every matter there is a time and judgment. Though the misery of a man increases greatly, for he does not know what will happen, so who can tell him when it will occur? No one has power over the spirit to retain the spirit. No one has the power in the day of death. There is no release from that war, and the wickedness will not deliver those who were given to it. 2 more verses. All this I have seen and applied my heart to every work that is done under the sun. There is a time in which one man rules over another to his own hurt. Then I saw the wicked buried, who had come and gone from the place of holiness, and they were forgotten in that city that they had so done. This also is vanity. Okay, I know that's a bunch of verses there. The purpose of those verses right there. And we read them in chunks so we can just kind of get the main idea. We're not picking apart every little thing, which I would like to, but we just don't have time for all that. These verses are saying, be careful how you present yourself in front of the king, which we don't have kings, but we do have rulers over us like governors or presidents or whatever. The Bible is actually saying there, be careful how you present yourselves in front of them. If it's your senator, representative, your mayor, you could meet the mayor. Number one, he deserves your respect, and God tells us to respect authority. Number two, it says it's in your best interest to follow the king's rules because, you'll be punished if you don't. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to apply it. You can apply it to your parents too, to respect the people that, because, the person that God puts in your life as your parent, or you're adopted by your grandparents, but it would still apply to them too. Whoever that person is that God puts in your life as your authority figure, it's in your best interest to follow them because, well, for one thing, Solomon says you'll be punished if you don't. And third, the king or the government, Solomon points out, can execute people. Now, that one actually won't apply to your parents, hopefully, that they would execute you. But, Solomon points out the government can put people to death, and that doesn't mean that they always do it for the right reasons. But Solomon's saying to respect the government because they actually can do that. He's just saying they can kill you, so watch out. And I'm just not saying that it's always right for them to do that, but he's just pointing it out as a fact of life. Verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and his days are prolonged, yet I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, nor will he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he does not fear before God. Sometimes whenever you make a threat, or if the government makes a threat and they hold off on carrying that threat out, you can think, well, I guess there's not really going to be any consequences. They did that 10 years ago. Nothing's ever happened to them. There's probably never going to be any consequences on them for it. What these verses are saying, when you nip those problems in the bud really quick, if you're ever in authority and you nip those problems in the bud, that means have quick consequences for them. People will learn that there's consequences for their actions. And so we can apply that to our lives. And then Solomon says sometimes people do get exactly what they deserve. Verse 14. There is a vanity which occurs on earth, that there are just men to whom it happens according to the work of the wicked. Again, there are wicked men to whom it happens according to the work of the righteous. And I said that this also is vanity. Okay, I got that backwards. This thing there, sometimes people don't get what they deserve. We see people doing evil things, and we see them doing things that are not right. And it seems like Is God ever going to get on them about that? Is God ever going to punish them for that? Is that person who's some corrupt person in government, are they just going to get away with the evil things that they've done forever? They're never going to be held accountable for it? We can look at that, and we could get frustrated by that. Solomon's pointing out here that God is going to catch up with everybody someday, because God's the judge of the whole world. So, think if someone's not a believer, what's going to happen to them whenever they die? They'll die and go to hell, right? That is their future. That's their eternity. So if someone is doing evil works, you might think, I guess they're just going to get away with it. No one's ever going to hold them accountable. Someday they'll die and go to hell. God is going to hold them accountable for it. It's a serious thing. Nothing gets by God. Jesus talked about this. He said, hey, the rain falls down on the wicked and the righteous. The sun shines on the wicked people and the righteous people. It just happens that way. While we're on earth, we aren't always going to see justice done. But after earth, whenever people stand before God, God says justice will always be done then. So what do we do whenever we see wicked people getting away with doing evil? What do we do? Do we get mad about it? Do we stomp our feet and just get sick of it and lose all faith in the world, lose all faith in the justice system, lose all faith in God? Is that what we do? No? We pray for them. That's what Jesus said to do. We won't go to those verses, but Matthew 5, 43 through 45. Jesus says, hey, it rains on the righteous and it rains on the wicked. The sun shines on the righteous and the sun shines on the wicked. So what do? Jesus says, pray for your enemies. Pray for the people who persecute you. Pray for the people who seem to be getting away with doing evil stuff. Pray for them. That's Jesus' answer. Sometimes, we've had a president that I did not like very much. Yeah, write that one down. We've had a president that I've not been fond of, and I've been convicted a lot of times that I've spent more times complaining about him than I've spent praying for him. And no matter who our next president is, try to spend more time praying for them than you do complaining about them. Let's finish up. I think there's 3 more verses in here. Let's read them real quick. I'm at verse 15. So I commended enjoyment because a man has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on the earth, even though no one sleeps day or night, then I saw all the work of God, that a man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. For though a man labors to discover it, yet he will not find it. Moreover, though a wise man attempts to know it, he will not be able to find it. You won't understand everything in the world. I don't understand a lot of things. When I look at the news, I'm like, how did this ever happen sometimes? I'm really shocked at some of the things. Unless it's the judgment of God sometimes. I'm like, how did this happen? God says that even in the midst of a world that doesn't make sense, he will send us a peace that passes understanding. Solomon's advice is just to realize that. Solomon wants us to know. And you can change this if you want to change that word to stinks, you can. Sometimes life sucks. Sometimes life stinks. But eventually you can die. That's actually what Solomon is saying right there.
We gotta write that?
Yeah. And this is what chapter 8 was all about. Verse 14, Solomon said, this is what it is on the earth. He's talking about the wicked get away with it. The righteous don't get credit for the good things. The wicked don't get credit for their bad things. They get away with it, he says in verse 14, on the earth. But in the afterlife, everything will be 100% fair. When you feel treated unfairly, Solomon says, just remember, this world is not supposed to be a fair place. This is a world that sucks sometimes. It's a life that is not fair. It's not meant to be fair. But someday you will get an upgrade. What's that upgrade called? Death. Yeah. It connects right back with that first thing that we talked about.
Afterlife.
The upgrade that you get is death. One short story. When I was in college, my speech teacher, had us do the impromptu speech. And that's whenever you get 2 minutes to prepare for a speech that lasts 2 minutes. You just draw a subject out of a hat, and you have to do a speech on that subject. And you get 2 minutes to prepare it. And your 2 minutes that you get to prepare it, it's while the person in front of you is doing their 2-minute speech. That's the only time you have to prepare. They're giving a 2-minute speech, and you have to read this piece of paper and think during that time, how can I talk about this for 2 minutes and make a good speech out of it? And that's what the impromptu speech was. And someone raised their hand and they said, okay, But what if the person in front of us, only takes a minute and a half? Or what if they only take 1 minute? Or what if they take 3 minutes and they go over on their time?
So,
I might get extra time, or I might not get even my full 2 minutes. And the teacher looked at us and she said, sometimes life sucks. Sometimes it's just not fair. She says, I'm not going to give you an extra 30 seconds to practice. You just got to get up and make your speech, even if they didn't give you enough time. Sometimes life's just not fair. And I just remembered when she said that, and I've remembered that for years. I think, that's not fair. Stop myself. Well, sometimes life's not fair. Sometimes life sucks. That's what the teacher said. And we actually just got to remember that. This world is not supposed to be the place where everything always happens fair. But we got to remember, Solomon says, our existence in heaven, everything will be fair. After we leave this world, everything will be fair and just in heaven. Death will only be an upgrade. So if there's one thing these chapters have taught us, it's that life is not even as good as death. And that's what, I know it's a little bit depressing, but that's where we're going to leave off for today. Next time, the weirdest chapter in the Bible, Proverbs chapter 30. And then after that, we'll come back to Ecclesiastes and we'll talk about how to defeat death.